Hey, Taylor Elwood here, and it's been a little while since I've done a video, so thought I would go ahead and do that. Today I want to talk about what the alchemy of life is. And why I think it's important. So the latest book project I'm working on is the Alchemy of Life, and it's really a book project about working with the biology of the body. Working with the microbiota of the body. So bacteria, neurotransmitters, hormones, archaea, protozoa, all those things that basically make up the body on a microbiotic level. We often with our body, we often think of ourselves as just kind of like being Wall-E independent, you know? So we have our own body, and we don't necessarily think about the fact that our body actually relies upon a whole bunch of different types of other life in order to exist. I mean, you have just the cells of the body, for example, and all those cells are living cells that that basically take on and become part of something larger, whether it's an organ or something else. And I just think it's kind of fascinating because we in a sense we take our bodies for granted. And in magic, what I really see a lot of times is that there's so much of an emphasis on the spirit world that we forget about the body and the realm of the body, and exploring that in its own right as a form of spiritual manifestation. And so for me, the alchemy of life is really an opportunity to explore the inner reality of the human body and connect with neurotransmitters and bacteria and all of that, and work with them collaboratively to create a better experience with the human body. And at the same time to refine what I call experiential embodiment, which is something I'll be talking about more in the time to come. I would say that the alchemy of life is really just one step among many that I'm taking as I shift my magic in some new directions. I've done lots of work with pop culture magic, and I'm happy about that. But I want to kind of get back to some of the other experiments that I haven't worked on in a while. And so the alchemy of life is a huge part of that particular focus and work. Why I think it's an important part of the evolution of my magical work, and really just magical work in general, is that it allows me to take some of the work I've already done with the body to the next level. I started working with the body, with my body, when I was 20 years old. I've been diagnosed when I was 18 with, among other things, manic depression. Bipolar 2 disorder was what, I guess the official diagnosis. And whenever I would get depressed, I would always feel like my head was swimming in a vat of chemicals. And when I was 20 years old, I came across this work by Barbara Ann Brennan called Hands of Light. And in it, she talks about how she narrowed her consciousness down to the level of a cell and traveled throughout her body. And I thought that was pretty cool. And then I also read Programming the Human Biocomputer by John Lilly. And because she referenced his work a lot, so I began reading that book, and as well, to kind of learn a bit more about what he was talking about. And his argument was that you could program your body through your brain, that you could go in and essentially make physiological changes. So I thought that was fascinating. And by this time, I had also read the first book of the Dune series. I hadn't read the other ones until much later, but when I read that first book, I was always fascinated by the fact that the couple of the characters had control over their bodies, that they could manipulate the physiology of their bodies, and it got me to thinking, well, is that possible? And my motivation really was that I did not want to continue to be depressed for the rest of my life. I didn't want to have to go through the shifts between depression and mania, through manic depression. And so I thought, there had to be a way to stabilize this. And so I took Barbara Ann Brennan's concepts and John Lilly's concepts in Programming the Human Biocomputer, and I took it a bit further. I decided to go into my body and that I would find a way to interact with the electrochemistry of my brain and make some changes to it. And the first working, what I did is I changed the reuptake cycle of the serotonin. Serotonin is really good for stabilizing mood, and this was something I'd learned about way back when. So it was good for stabilizing emotional moods, and I thought, that had to be the issue. And I had also read how for people who had to take medicine for bipolar 2 disorder, that what they would end up doing is they would end up taking the serotonin blockers that would basically slow down the reuptake cycle. And I thought there has to be a way to do this naturally without having to take chemicals that are foreign to my body and deal with all of the nasty side effects that occur. And what ended up happening is I slowed down. I went in and I basically slowed down the reuptake cycle of the serotonin. And after that, I never experienced the chemical version of depression again. The biochemical version, it just stopped altogether and it went away for good. And it was because I had gone in and slowed down the reuptake cycle of the serotonin and made sure that it wouldn't put me into that kind of a state of being. Now, this isn't to say I've never felt depressed since. There have been moments of time that I felt depressed, but I've never felt that swimming in the head feeling that I used to feel so long ago. I mean, it's still something I vividly remember, but it's not something I've ever experienced since then. And that was because I went in. Now, that initial working was pretty cool, and I would go on to do some work with trying to work with the DNA of the body and seeing if I could map the elemental energies to that. But what I also did is I eventually got to the point where I was like, it would be interesting to work with the neurotransmitters and other things and treat them as living spiritual entities. After all, they're part of the human body. Why? How do we know they're not living spiritual entities? That was really the question I put to myself. And since I didn't have, there was no definitive answer in that way, and certainly nothing I could find in magical books, what I ended up doing is I found that, yes, in fact, I could treat them that way. And so in my book, Inner Alchemy, I share those particular... I shared my initial work with working with the neurotransmitters of the body, and since then I've refined it greatly. I've shared some of that advancement in my book Magical Identities, but I'm continuing to work. And so right now I'm actually going through and I'm putting together what I would consider to be this grimoire called the Alchemy of Life. And the grimoire has some different paintings and things like that in it of the different neurotransmitters, basically impressions that I've gotten from it, and then a description. I'm also going to talk quite a bit in the book about how to work with the body in that way. And so that for me is step one of what I would consider to be, I shouldn't say step one because it's really not. I mean, I've been shifting my focus toward experiential embodiment for a while, but I feel like with Magical Identity, I was doing that, and then suddenly, I realized I needed to work on pop culture magic again, and so it's I kind of put that on hold, and so I'm getting back to it now, and so it's the pop culture magic work is done for now. I'm happy that I did it, but it's put back onto the shelf for a while to cook. Which is good. You need to let things cook. And so now I'm taking this other thing and it's ready to go. And so the Alchemy of Life is really that first step back into experiential embodiment, but I'm going to take it in some interesting directions in other books as well. I'm not going to really say too much about those right now because, as always, I like to keep my work close to the vest until I'm ready to start sharing it. But I'm happy to share this work because I've already put it out there before, and it's some fascinating stuff. So right now it's been kind of interesting because I'm going and looking, I'm going through these paintings and I'm writing up these entries, and I'm really just kind of sharing my impressions and also the here's how you can work with this. But then what I'm going to do in the rest of the book is really talk about some of the actual workings that can be done and things to keep in mind, but then also explore the magic of the body even further. Because I think that when we that one of the ways we need to evolve our magical practice is to learn how to live in our bodies and make our bodies part of our spiritual practice. I think people do that to some degree, but we take it for granted, and that's not something I really want us to do any longer. So anyway, I just thought I would share this with you today. This is kind of one of the things that I'm working on right now, and I thought it would be fun to let you in on it a little bit. So I hope you enjoyed, and take care and have a great day.